Hey guys, Diana here from Clay to Canopy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. I was in the middle of doing a different project and about to do a process that I thought would be really great for its own little tutorial. And what I have done here is I have taken this already pre-made texturing tool used in baking, but they also have these texturing tools that are used for ceramics and polymer clays and stuff that you can get at the craft store. And I turned this into a stamp out of plaster. This first one cracked on me. I'll make another one. And then I used this stamp to press into my clay so that I could get these detail strips, and I wanted to look a little more seamless. So I thought it would be a great little tutorial to jump into and do while I was in the middle of this other thing. So here we go. So the first thing you need to do is to convert your silicone template, or in this case this is plastic, into a stamp. I have some 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch square stock that I just cut up from scrap. This stuff though is not perfectly square, so as long as when you cut it your pieces can butt up and lock in, then you're okay. Then I have a piece of plywood that I cut, and I want to make sure that the piece I'm making the stamp out of fits within the center of that, and I have room to get these little pieces of square stock screwed on. Make sure your square stock sits above your plastic or silicone mat by at least 1/2 inch. Once you have your pieces, you then want to coat them in some clear packing tape so that they don't stick to your plaster. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble this. So I countersink the holes here to make life easier. Alright, with this piece now in place, I'm going to go ahead and mix up some plaster and pour it in here to create my press stamp. Okay, so I have my plaster and a stick, it's just a scrap piece of wood as a mixing stick, and some water here. Basically what I did is I eyeballed the volume of water to how much I think I need in there, and it is going to increase in volume when you do add the plaster, but don't disturb the surface. You want to continue to just add your plaster until you see a mountain form that no longer dissolves in the water. Eroding, my mountain's eroding. I'm going to keep adding more plaster. I ordered my little mold here online, but you can find them at Michael's, cake decorating places. All right, so my mountain's not going anywhere. I'm gonna go ahead and start to stir. I wanna make sure that I break up any of the lumps to get this as smooth as I possibly can. And as soon as I have it pretty smooth, I'm gonna go ahead and pour my plaster. Doing a little tap to get rid of some air bubbles, make sure that I really fill up where that texture is, and now I'm going to let this set. Any excess plaster that you have in your container, just set it aside and let it harden. You should be able to break it out and throw it away. I took it apart today. It's not quite set yet. I want to have it a little bit deeper and more defined, so I'm going to come in with just my loop tool and expand this while it's still soft before I let it fully dry out. If you don't have patterns like this template, you could most certainly just take some wood like I have here, pour some of that into it, and let it set somewhat, and while it's soft like this, you can come in and just carve away whatever patterns you want it to be. All these little bits that are getting stuck in here, I'm not going to worry about. They'll be much easier to get rid of once this is dried. Okay, I'm gonna set this aside, let it dry. It needs to come to a full dry so that it doesn't get damaged as I press it into the clay. The next thing you want to do is begin to prep your molds. You're going to do this in a very similar fashion to create the initial stamp, but this time you're going to create boxes that equal the length of whatever you're trying to cast. So in my case, I have 5 of them for this project that I'm working on. They're basically going to become the foundation around the base of a house. I went ahead and I prepped them by measuring out some of my scrap wood. They all are the same width, and to make sure that I end up with the exact size that I needed, the first thing I did was just to score a line here, and then I went in and I measured properly from one end to the other end, you know, to make sure I have my exact 16 inches, used a square to get that line nice and perfect, and then did the same thing for the side so that I know that inside here is a perfect 16 by 3 inch rectangle, so that even if my sticks are not exactly perfect, as long as one edge is straight, I can come in and make sure that I'm just guiding it up against the line. And you can see in the back end here, I might have a little bit of extra, but who cares? The important measurement is inside that rectangle. I have all my pieces here for these guys. I also have, which I will be using to roll out my clay on, this is just a little shooter board with a 1/4 inch square stock glued to each side, so that when I roll this out with a rolling pin, my slab of clay is going to be a 1/4 inch in height. I went in and determined how high I wanted the casting, so this is my cast line, so that I can make sure that when I pour the cement in, that they all end up becoming the equal height. It'll help me level it. So I had to account for the 1/4 inch that I'm going to have in thickness of my slab, and then determine how wide I wanted that to be, and I ended up going with 7/16, so it's just a 16th under 1/2 inch there, so that I'll have this brick protruding and then a little plate for it to get glued down to. Once you have your lines marked out, you can begin to apply your tape. I'm just going to apply tape to the sides of these square stock because the bottom of this is going to be in contact with the clay, which will not have the cement, won't stick to the clay. Okay, once that's on there, you can go ahead and assemble. And I think that what might be easiest for me is to just grab some little quick clamps, and that way I can clamp it on there and then flip it over. I'm going to make sure that my first piece that I'm going to screw on is at the line I need it to be at. These are just 99-cent little quick clamps that I got from Home Depot. Flip it over. I have my bit with my pre-drill head on it. Always secure in 2 spots so that you don't get twisting. And then I have some 1-inch drywall screws. Okay, so that's one that is ready to go. I'm going to repeat that for my other 4 pieces, and then I will be back here to move on to the next step. Now it's time to start putting these things together. So I have a right angle square, which you could get by with just a ruler if you had one. And then I have a pair of wire cutters, a fettling knife, and then a rolling pin with my shooter board here, cottle board. Shooter board is wood term. Okay. And so I am going to just be cutting off chunks of, I have just red clay. It really doesn't matter what kind of clay you're using. White clay probably would be better since it won't stain your cement when you go to pour it, but this is what I have, so this is what I'm going to use. This is way more than I need. I'm going to go ahead and pound out some of this and then use my rolling pin to roll it flat. Even a little bit more. And the point of this board is that I will basically be able to roll until the rolling pin hits to a point where it's riding against the 2 side pieces of the wood as essentially a bumper. I'm not firing this clay, so I'm not too worried about breaking any of the ceramic rules that you would normally follow. Grab my stamp. Oh, I was worried that was going to happen. All right. That's okay. Unfortunately, the only plaster I had was this plaster of Paris. Normally I would use a stronger plaster and not have to worry about this breakage that just happened. This is also the reason why I didn't want to just cast the entire thing in plaster. I can do a bit of blending here. All right, I am gonna come in and make sure that I measure. This is gonna go into the 3 and 12. I'm gonna go ahead and make sure I get a good connection. I don't get any leakage. I think that's all right. Okay, so I'm gonna set this aside for a moment and move on to using this piece since it's already rolled out. I don't want to leave this for too long sitting here. I'm not going to do all of these 5 molds without pouring the cement first because I don't want this to dry out, but because this is already sitting here, I might as well just get it in. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pour these 2 before I continue with the other ones. I have the 2 I'm gonna be pouring into. I can see my lines, and then I'm gonna throw on some gloves. I have some water and the container I'll be mixing into, and something to mix with. Not quite sure how much I'm gonna need, so start with a little bit and then begin adding my cement. Should have done this the other way around. Nothing like making a mess. Should have had powder in here first and then added a little bit of water. I'm going to turn these sideways so that I can read the line while I level. Filled it way more than need be. All right, I'm gonna let these set and then hopefully they're all right. Move on to finish up the rest of them. All right, guys, it is time to open these bad boys up and see what's going on. Worried I was gonna have too much dried clay. I am going to rinse these off, but the red iron in the clay body have stained it some, and I'm going to take advantage of that because it is supposed to be brick. And see if I can do a bit of cleanup here. Still need to be careful, even though this is cement, it is still very thin. All right, I think that's going to look like a really nice foundation there. That's one. Okay, here are my results after the washing. This one I did first, so it's starting to dry up a bit, and I just used a toothbrush, some lukewarm water, and some dish soap to go in and scrub up what I could. These areas that you still see the red, it's stained, which I'm okay with, you know, for what I'm using it for. I'm probably going to end up painting these anyway. I'm just going to show you. This is part of what I'm working on. The foundation of the side of one of my pieces. This is going to work out perfectly for what I wanted it for, and I'll have this going all around the base of the house that I'm building. You don't have to do this for faux brick. You could do this type of pattern for just about anything. Just want to talk about a couple things before I sign off here. Number one, you do not have to even have a pattern, you know. All you need is the clay itself, and to rig up yourself one of these little molds, roll your slab out, and then press different things into the clay. You could, you know, use screws, use anything to just go in and carve and make your own textures and your own patterns, and then go ahead and pour the concrete in. You could buy pre-made stamps and use those to press into the clay before you pour. And also you could just make your own stamps by taking, you know, a little Dixie cup. You know, I was thinking about possibly making individual little bricks, and what I would do in that case is go ahead and fill this Dixie cup halfway up with some of that clay, and then carve into it the little brick that I wanted to make, pour some plaster, and then that little piece becomes your stamp. And you can go ahead and use that as your device to press into the clay before you go and you pour. Lastly, the clay that I'm using is actually a ceramic clay that I use in my classes, and it's water-based because it's not oil. I don't use a lot of oil clays. If I had used a white clay versus this red clay, I would certainly not be dealing with any of these oxide issues, and you can certainly use a white clay that would have been come off clean. That's pretty much all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not done so already, and hope you join me soon.